Looking for some inspiration? You've come to the right show. Step into your divine feminine energy with me as I spill the tea on leadership and life. Hi, I'm Tracy M., your host here on Brave Girls, and I've got your back, and no mean girls are allowed. I've been called the fairy godmother of storytelling, and my gift is to unearth people's stories, share them, and make the world a better place for all of us. So sit back, relax, and listen in as we send some more positive vibes out into the universe. Enjoy the show.
So welcome to Brave Girls with Tracy M. I'm super uber excited today because I have my very good friend, Dr. Toni Draper, on the phone line with me today. And, I don't have very many friends that have their own Wikipedia page, but Dr. Toni has her own Wikipedia page for if anybody wants to do a little research on her and her family business. But I'm going to let Dr. Toni introduce herself. I think she's a great fit for season 2, where I'm telling everyone they need to listen up. And it's a crazy world out there, but Dr. Toni is a leader in so many dimensions, and I just think she has so much to share with the world, and I want everyone to know who Dr. Toni is. So, Dr. Toni, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Tracy. I am so glad to be here with you. It's always good, we connect as friends and colleagues, but it's nice to be able to talk to you today.
Yeah, so Dr. Toni and I think the first time I met Dr. Toni was many years ago at an event, and then she and I have served on the Girl Scout board together. We've also been members of an organization in Baltimore called Executive Alliance, which is for leaders in the community. And Dr. Toni's really a pillar in the community, and her family, the Murphy family, is sort of like royalty in Baltimore. In my mind, she's just giving me the look like, no, we're not. Yes, you are. Yes, you are. So, Dr. Toni, tell us a little bit about your family. And, I know one thing that I did not know until recently was that your grandmother was a founding member of Delta Sigma Theta, DST, which is probably, one of the largest Divine Nine organizations in the country. So tell us all about your backstory and growing up in Baltimore and with such a epic family.
How much time do you have? But like a lot of families, when you grow up in the same place, generation after generation after generation, you tend to have roots in that community. In Baltimore, we lovingly call Baltimore Smalltimore. So it's the kind of place where it's a cheers town, a town where everybody knows your name. And so because there are a lot of us, we do have a lot, I guess a pretty deep reach. We've been around for a very, very long time. So my great-grandfather, John H. Murphy, who had been enslaved, at 52 years old, started a business with $200. You'll appreciate this, Tracy, and venture capital from my great-grandmother. To start this business when reportedly less than 2% of the Black population could read, and it was a newspaper. That's what he started. So I think I said they had 10 children. Did I say they had 10 children?
No, 10 children. Wow. Big family.
10 children, 52 years old, late 1800s. So just kind of, put that in your mind. And so there are, and there were, and there still are a lot of us. And we were raised to give back to community, not so much to wear a badge as a business owner, but more to wear a badge as a community leader, servant, participant, when necessary, one that would speak up against injustice and serve on school boards and do whatever else we needed to do to be a vibrant part of our communities. And so I grew up in that atmosphere, right? So grew up in an atmosphere that said, you have to work hard. Nobody's going to give you anything just because we own a business. That just means that you guys are the ones that are going to work for the 50 cents an hour. I think my starting salary at maybe 13 or 14 years old was $1 an hour. But you're going to be the ones that are going to do the heavy lifting and the hard work. If the NAACP is filing a suit to integrate the beach, which is a true story, you're going to be the children that are going to go to the beach and get the rocks thrown at you and test the law to see if it is indeed in place. So I grew up in that atmosphere. I grew up in an atmosphere that said education is important. And so my grandfather and many of his siblings were college graduates and their children. And so in our family, it wasn't about whether you were going to go to college, it was where were you going to go to college. And my mom and her sister's higher education was paid for by the state of Maryland at a Big Ten school. My mother went to the University of Wisconsin because Maryland would not admit students of color. And if the Black college didn't offer you a major and hers was journalism, then the state of Maryland paid tuition. So they paid her tuition and her sister's tuition for the University of Wisconsin and another sister for the University of Minnesota. And I have a funny story I will tell now about how my brother and I said to my younger sister, you're going to go to the University of Wisconsin, because that's what my mom said, I want somebody to go to my alma mater. My brother and I said, oh, we don't want to do Midwest and we don't want to do cold. And my grandfather on the other side, who was chair of the board of Morgan at the time, would tell the 16 grandchildren, you're going to go to Morgan. So when my sister, who's much younger, was born, my brother and I are pretty close in age, we would say, guess where you're going to college? We started programming her when she was about 3.
You said we're going to Morgan, but you can go out in the Midwest in the cold.
Morgan, because see, she is 7 years younger than I am and 5 years younger than my brother. So when she was a very, very little girl, when my mom and the rest of the family start talking, because they start talking to you about college when you're like 3 years old, right?
Mm-hmm.
Programming you that's what you're going to do. We would say to her, guess where you're going to college? And she would say, where? Morgan, like you and Jimmy. And we would say, no, you're going to go to the University of Wisconsin, like your mom and like your aunts did. And that's what she did.
Oh, that's amazing. That's amazing. So you guys have ties out there too. That's great.
We have some
That's
time.
really great. Yeah. So talk a little bit about like your great grandfather. He gets the $200 from your great grandmother to buy this business. What was his vision for it back in the day? He just, he wanted more people to be literate, or he had an interest in media, or what was his kind of thinking?
He had been, as I said already, he had been enslaved.
Right.
He was a sergeant in the Civil War.
Okay.
He was and I'm not quite sure, I've looked it up, but he was a whitewasher by trade.
Mm-hmm.
His vision was that there was and still is a lot of news about our community that people don't know about. So he wanted to publicize the good news of people's families and their churches, and then eventually he got into certainly the civic life of community. He wanted to empower community. And so his motto was, in his own words, he said, a newspaper succeeds because it believes first in God, then in itself, then in the present generation, and that it has no other aim, but to expose injustice. He said more about that. But certainly he was an advocate, civil rights champion, long before people were using the word civil rights. So that was his goal. And so if you look at the early issues of the Afro, the one-pagers, right? You'll see a little bit of church news. You'll see some social news, like, guess who was in town today? And this is what they were doing. And this is what they were wearing, by the way. And so you had that kind of news all in this one page, right? It was a big broadsheet page, 3 sentences, if I remember correctly. Or he would start talking about a little bit about politics and about government and about, just those things that were happening in community that nobody was talking about in that format. People were talking about it, but if you live on the west side, you probably were talking to your neighbor, next door, right?
Right.
Same thing on the east side. But when you got the Afro, you could say, oh, wait a minute, I live on the west side, but I can see what Tracy's doing on the east side. I can see what Tony's doing in the south. So
he's a true community builder through that.
True community builder. He died in 1922. the same year that one of his sons unfortunately drowned.
Oh, wow.
Yep, his name was Daniel. My grandfather at that time was a professor of German at
Hmm.
Harvard. So he's a Howard grad and a Harvard grad. But his father tapped him to be the successful
Successor. Hmm.
editor. But each of the brothers had a role in
Hmm.
the business, right?
Right.
There were 5 boys, 5 girls, 5 men, 5 women, and all the men worked at the business in that generation. And not the women, but they all got the same salary. So my great grandfather said, "Yeah, you guys are going to work, but your sisters are going to get the same salary." So he was a visionary, of course, I didn't know him, but when you read about him, I mean, just to have the audacity to start any business, 52 at that time was old.
Correct. Correct. Yeah. And it's interesting because, when I think about the Afro, everything that you said in terms of his vision and the way that I believe that, there's a lot of things that aren't in mainstream media. And so this is the outlet where that community news can be shared and you can uplift each other and share your stories.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yep. And it was also the outlet that kept up with national news. If you think about the times, and even today, mainstream media, rightfully so, or it depends on how people look at it, they cannot afford to do niche kind of reporting and marketing. They're more general audience, right?
Right.
We can and could afford to do that for lots of reasons. First of all, because nobody else was doing it.
Right.
Right, people were not in Baltimore, so people were not doing it. And secondly, the volume that we of space that we
Hmm.
devote to your garden party and your baby
Right.
dedication and your wedding. If you read mainstream media, especially during the early days of the Afro, you would think that Black people didn't get married, right? You
Hmm.
didn't see our weddings
Right.
in the paper, or when you had unfortunate stories about lynchings. I look back through our archives. A mainstream paper may have just put it there as very, very cold statistically. It happened, blamed the victim a lot of times. You read the
Hmm.
Afro, and the Afro went down to the Eastern Shore and sat at that mom's stable and found out who her son was.
Hmm.
Focus more on the human interest element of that. And people trusted us, and they still do, to come into their kitchens, to come into their living rooms, and to talk with them about what's happening in their lives, whether it's good news or news that they would care not to, really talk about, but they trust us.
Hmm. So I know the Afro started in Baltimore, but isn't there more of a national reach, like you said, now in other like places in the U.S. or whatever?
Well, let me say this. At one time, the Afro itself had 13 print editions, including a national,
Wow. Oh,
right?
wow. That's a lot.
So I'm probably going to miscount, but I know there were 2 in Baltimore, 2 in Washington, 1 in Philadelphia, 1 in Richmond, 1 in North Carolina, 1 in South Carolina. There was a national edition. So up and down the East Coast, the Carolinas. So we own our own printing press. We employed 200 people, and everything was produced in Baltimore. That to me is amazing. Just the manufacturing side of
Yes.
that.
Yes.
A union shop at that,
Hmm.
and a large cadre of paper boys and girls in the major markets. So yes, that was national then, but it's national now because of so
Digital.
yeah, and yeah, digital. I mean, we are digital first. We say we're not your grandmother's newspaper. Uh, and I don't need to tell you this, Tracy. The product or your content, yeah, it may shift some, but your news is your news, but how you get it out. So today,
Hmm.
you're doing social media, you're doing all kinds of things to get the word out and trying to get verifiable, trustworthy news out there because there's so much misinformation and disinformation that's every single place. So we're national, but we're international. We have a large following from West Africa, for example.
hmm hmm Yeah, I think that is definitely a role that you play because people don't know who to trust, but because of your legacy, I think, and the track record and the types of content that has been produced, I'm sure people's grandparents read the Afro and you know what I mean? We're subscribers. And so you have that reputation in the market as I'm going to find out the real deal from the
Right.
Afro,
Right.
right?
You meet people now who will tell you, and depending on what their frame of reference is, but I've met a lot of people who say, first of all, because you have to be if you want the print edition, you have to subscribe to it, you get it in the mail, as opposed to
Right.
it used to be hawked on buses and on corners and in stores, right?
Right.
But
Right.
we meet a lot of people who say, "Oh yeah, the Afro, my grandmother read it," and I meet a lot of people who want to show me their 1950
Right. Right. Right.
copies because back in those times, people would hold on to the printed copy especially if it
If it's
contained.
about them or their family, yeah.
So last week, true story, Mayor Brandon Scott, the mayor of Baltimore City, always says, I wrote for the Afro at one time. I did some things for the Afro. So we had found one of his articles for a long time ago that was printed. But just recently, we found while he was in high school, his English teacher wrote to us talking about how brilliant he was and how engaged he was and how good a writer he was. We've got this long letter from his English teacher, and she's asking the Afro, and I don't remember the date, I'm sorry. She's asking us to consider having him as a summer intern, and she attaches his work.
That's amazing.
Kept saying, I was an intern, I was an intern, I was an intern. And we would say, Mr. Mayor, let's see what we can find. Just recently, we found this file and we were able, our archives team, they're amazing. But anyway, they were able to clean it up in a way, because it was old, in a
Right.
format that looks like it was just done almost. And, digitize it, download it, send it to him, and he has it.
Yeah, he needs to print that thing and frame it.
Right, because he knew he had done it. So it's his work, but it's
hmm
the cover letter that's really so I think so impactful because it talks about his leadership, it talks about his writing, it talks about one day he's going to do something great, and then now here he is, mayor of a major city.
Right. Right. Oh, I love that story. I love that. So, I know that, you've kind of dipped your toe in and out of the Afro over time as a mother, grandmother, great grandmother, pastor, things of that nature. So, um, I'm fascinated by like your journey, and I'm fascinated by, before we came on the show, you were talking about your second book. So, talk a little bit about like your journey and you're a very curious person, I think, and very you know, like inquisitive. So, like, how has that really served you?
Well, I am a very curious person, and I'm also the kind of person, if I in my curiosity, when I want to know more about something, I t- I tend to pursue a degree in that. Some people would say, "Well, why don't you just take a couple of courses?" Well, I'm also the kind of person that likes closure to something. So I don't want to
hmm
sit through a ton of classes and not have anything to show for it. So I followed whatever the passion was and always manage to find a connection, if you will. So
Oh, I love that.
let me give an example. So,
Yeah.
and I'll talk about my in and out of the business as well. In high school, I had an interest in a whole lot of things, right? And I already said that, college was not an option. And I had an aptitude for foreign language.
Mm,
But who knew that when I decided that Spanish was going to be my major, French my minor in college, and I was the only foreign language teacher who graduated in my whole class that got a job teaching two languages. There were only a couple of us that got jobs teaching foreign languages at all
Mm-hmm.
out of college. It just wasn't the thing. But who knew this many years later that that knowing Spanish would be so important in the world today? I don't know it as well as I did. It's about vocabulary, and we weren't talking AI and internet
Right.
and emails. Those things were not in
Right.
existence. But the appreciation for the culture.
Mm-hmm.
I think I already had that appreciation, but I have a deeper appreciation for people of different backgrounds and cultures, and the fact that language is culture and language is power. So even when I see Spanish speaking people and I greet them or can say a simple phrase, it does something to lift their spirit and to say, hey, you see me, you hear me.
Mm-hmm.
I can, that's a trust thing too, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
so I did that for a while. I taught middle schools. I taught them French, Spanish, and manners, not always in that in that era, in that order rather. And that wasn't my first. That was my first real paid job. My first job was at the Afro, right?
Right, right.
That's a whole long story about how so many of us went to went to the family business. But I never thought I was going to make the family business my career, even though I worked there summers and weekends and that type of thing. But I actually left teaching to go to the New Jersey Afro.
I saw that on your Wikipedia page.
Hey, oh, I haven't looked at that
You
page
you need to look at your Wikipedia page.
to see what it's saying there. But they were my mom was chairman of the board. They were thinking about closing their branch, and I asked, had anybody taken a look at that to see what it
Right.
really was like. So I did that. So being curious, I went there. I did that, and then spent my year there. Made my recommendation, and then came back to Baltimore looking for a position, not necessarily with the Afro. That was like a one-time thing. And my husband
Mm-hmm.
and I went to this recruitment fair that Merrill Lynch was having, and I was the more professionally dressed person. He had on like his jeans. We didn't know we didn't know it was a recruitment fair. We just went. It was some kind of interest meeting. So it was like, you talk to them, no, you talk to them, no, you talk to them. I ended up talking to them, and I ended up getting hired.
Wow, that's amazing.
So I ended up getting hired, and then I realized, wait a minute. So yeah, they're gonna train you about stocks and bonds and trading and all of that. But I don't have that same kind of business background, right? So I went on and pursued an MBA. So I could give you this whole long
Right.
account of how these things connected, but they were things that I was interested in, right? So I
Right.
did that, and I've done a couple of other things, but I worked for them. But the thread through all of this, other than going to school and pursuing my passion, I'm a lifelong learner. So, but I think I'm cured now of going back to a formal degree program. I've done that three, four, five times. It would always lead to something, and there's nothing that I've done. And I say to people all the time, if you take a look at your life,
Mm-hmm.
the threads through your life, the good, the bad, and the ugly, they serve some kind of purpose.
I agree. There's always a through line.
A through line. There are things that you said, oh, never again, but you may not have said never again if you had not done them at least once. There are
Right.
things that you say, this helped to strengthen me, for who knew at that time that I was going to be CEO of the Afro when I decided to pursue an MBA. I'm doing it for one purpose. And the funny thing about master's programs, every single one, you take statistics over again. I told my husband, I said, I should know a little bit more about statistics by now because I've done it 4 or 5 times,
Right.
the exact same course. But who knew that how you might apply that? So I've done a lot of things, Tracy, following passion, following, And I like to say following God's voice.
Yeah, I think I'm Christian just like you, and I believe that God has given us a purpose. Ultimately, we're all here to serve other people, I believe, and especially if you're given a leadership role and that you should be of service, which sounds like that's what your great-grandfather also believed in. And I do believe that sometimes things don't always make sense, but the universe is always conspiring on your behalf, and that it's a build, right? And so something that you may have done 10, 15 years ago, and you like, why am I doing this? Now it's like, oh, it all becomes very clear that you wouldn't be where you are if you wouldn't have done those other things from your past, right? So I also talk to us a little bit about being a pastor and getting, sort of in that because I think that's also, part of leading is motivating and inspiring people, and it's just grounded in the Bible, a lot of what you're teaching.
Yeah, I think the other thing about what you just said, some things as you have a through thread, you're pursuing your interests and your passions, but other things like pastoring are a calling. So other things,
Yeah.
calling, right? And so
Yes.
my tendency to encourage people, uplift people, speak the truth to power and to people, right?
Right.
Had pastoring and those characteristics go somewhat together, but it's a calling.
Mm-hmm.
Even as a younger person, much younger, even when I was in high school, myself and two other people from the inner city of Baltimore, we were the only brown faces in a junior achievement program on Harford Road in Baltimore City, which took us 30 minutes to get to from West Baltimore all the way out to Northeast Baltimore. There I knew, and I knew before that I had a passion for speaking to people, and that people were moved by words that I said, never equating that with ministry. But certainly there again is another one of those skills that has a through line. But my call to ministry, it's just what it is. It's a calling as opposed to a pursuit. Let me say it. I mean, people do
That
pursue.
makes sense. That
Yeah,
makes sense.
but it's
Yeah,
not.
totally makes sense.
And it's not. It's almost something that you can't explain. People say, "Well, how do you know?" Well, depending on how you interact with God and how He speaks or she speaks, because God is a spirit, not
Right.
how you're spoken to, how you feel that you're spoken to, you know. The question is, how are you going to answer that? So for most of us who are in ministry, we have these long stories about God calling us, God calling us, God calling us, and us ignoring it, ignoring it until you could not ignore it anymore. So I didn't just jump into pastoring, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
I was preaching and teaching and ministering without title, if you will. I was not,
Right.
I was not a pastor. I was a person who felt a call to ministry, and I was serving in my local church,
Mm-hmm.
doing whatever the pastor of the church needed for not just me, but whatever the group of ministers.
Mm-hmm.
And part of the founding of a church as well, not as the pastor, but as a member. So when I was called into full-time ministry, I wasn't a pastor then. I was actually back at the Afro again,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because you already heard about the stockbroker, that type of thing, and then
Right.
I ended up back at the Afro. That's a long story, longer than we have today to talk about it. It's a fascinating story because it deals with family and business and next generation and unplanned succession and all of those kinds.
Mm-hmm.
And then I left and pursued that calling. So we can call it curiosity. I hope it's divine intervention that called me out of this full-time position at the Afro as president of the company into full-time ministry, not pastoring, which means I wasn't going to any place where I was getting paid on a regular basis. I was stepping out on faith, using the gifts that God had given me to share the
Mm-hmm.
gospel all over the world, by the way, doing
Really? Oh, I love that.
yeah,
I love that.
all over the world. I even had the, I guess it was nerve that when I visited England to go to the church where John Wesley, the founder of Methodism, had preached. A friend of mine, and I was preaching in London, and we thought, we're just going to go and see what it's like. And
Mm-hmm.
the door was open. We didn't see anybody, so we went up into the pulpit and acted like we were the preacher of the hour.
I love that. I love that. I love that. Yeah, wow, that's amazing. That is really amazing. Yeah, and I really I see you as a pillar in the community on so many dimensions and as a connector. Like you bring people together and you create community. And I also am, I see you kind of carrying out the vision of your great grandfather in terms of speaking out about injustices or pointing them out or making it like obvious. I love that about you. Talk a little bit. One of the other things, I know you've been married for a very long time to the same person. Talk a little bit about how that, you know, you've been able to have a marriage for a very, very long time, which a lot of people can't do these days. What do you think? And how do you think, you talked about your third book or your second book, I guess. Talk about that. Talk about your marriage and that relationship, because many of us, we're either in relationship, out of relationship, want a relationship.
Right. So I don't advise people to do it this way because of marital counseling and don't advise it to be that quick. But my husband and I actually met on Labor Day of 1973, and we were married in January of 1974.
Wow.
He
So
proposed.
you knew.
Yeah, he really knew. He really knew. And so we met in September. He proposed in October. We got married in January. So I know that had to be the grace of God, because we didn't do premarital. We did two or three sessions of premarital counseling with the priest.
Right.
I was raised, or was it reared, Episcopalian, so we did that, and then off we were. We had some things we talked about from the beginning. Be friends first. We didn't know, I don't think, exactly what that meant until you get older, because people tend to marry who they are attracted to physically, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and so that's nothing's wrong with that. I mean, that you have that attraction to the person, you love their personality, you like the fact that usually people are young, they're vibrant in their careers, they're doing all of this to build family. But those things change all over time. So put God first. I should have said that. Be friends. Be friends. Um, know that marriage is not always 50-50. Sometimes it's 100-0. You feel like you're giving 100% and the other person is not giving anything to the relationship. The other thing we did at the beginning was we said, okay, let's have some ground rules around how we are going to navigate certain things before they happen. Now, you cannot predict everything that's going to happen in a marriage, but we decided
Correct.
early on that if you want to leave, you just go into another room. You're not leaving out of the exterior door.
Right.
Unless, and I would say to couples now, unless somebody's safety is compromised, but if it's just he thinks one way, you think another way,
Get that space.
get that, but then agree that that space is not forever, because there's some people who say, I want to talk about this right this minute. You got to do it right. And there are other people that I'm saying, look, I can't talk to you about it right this minute because I'm going to say something that
Right.
I'm regret saying. So there has to be some kind of compromise, right? If you're not quite seeing eye to eye on something, like Give each
Right.
other space, but decide from the beginning that that space is not going to be more than 2 hours, or it's not going to be whatever.
Right.
It's not going to be overnight, it's not, you're not going to let the sun go down on your wrath like the Bible says. So we talked about those kinds of things. And in our third book, we will talk it's our first book together. It's my third book. We will talk about 50 tips for staying married 50 years. And I'm gonna give this one for free. Tracy, one of the tips is, don't go to bed raggedy. Don't go to bed with buttons missing and things torn, things that you wouldn't do when you first met. Now, when you first were married, right?
I love that. I love that.
So be intentional about that. So you want to hear something funny? The other day, my husband said, because he's always buying me pajamas and things like that. He bought me a gray pair and he bought me a blue pair, kind of same material. But I figured blue and gray go together. He's a Cowboys fan. I'm sorry.
Right.
Anyway, and he said, what was that tip about going to bed looking raggedy? I said, what? You bought this? He said, yeah, but I didn't buy that top with that bottom. That top.
He thought it was raggedy when you mix and match. I love it.
He said, that top goes with the other one. I said, well, Andre, it matches. He said, yeah, but it doesn't go together. I said, okay, all right.
That's hilarious. Hilarious.
That was like, I don't know, I'll make up a night. That was Wednesday of some week.
Right.
So Thursday morning he goes someplace, and we're not detectives, so we don't say, okay, where are you going and what time? Go. He said, I'll be back. He comes back with his Nordstrom bag, and it's 2 more pair of pajamas in there. One pair is like the other pair that I was mismatching, except for it has long pants and that one had short. But anyway.
Love Andre. Love him. That's so funny.
Love him. And he will say to younger men, man, I don't care if you're married a year, 6 months, 50 years, the courtship doesn't end. He'll tell guys that you cannot let the courtship die. You have to continue treating her, buying things for her, serving her. And guys will look at him really, really strange, like, what's in it for me? He says, if you do that, you buy spontaneous gifts, you bring flowers. He brings flowers and cards just because. He said,
I did that this morning. I went to the grocery store. Yeah, that's so funny. I went to the grocery store this morning and they had fresh flowers that were half price. And I was like, oh, they're half price. And normally they're pretty expensive because they're pretty robust flowers. And so I bought them and I came home and I asked my husband if he would be my boyfriend. Because I was like, you got to keep the spark alive. And,
And it's an intentional thing.
It was very intentional. Yeah.
Marriages are like anything else. People get into a routine. And a lot of times when you're younger, the routine revolves around who has soccer, dance, gymnastics. If you have kids, everything is around their schedules. Yes. And if you're not careful, you get caught up in children's schedules. And that's the extent of your relationship. And guess what? They grow up. And hopefully they move out.
Right. These days they're all moving back, but
then couples look at each other and say, well,
who are you?
Yeah, who are you? Oh, you were the person that was carpooling on the Wednesday when I was doing the Tuesday. Right. So I say to young couples, you have to be intentional about your relationship. You did not marry your children.
That's good.
Did you marry your buddies? You didn't marry your buddies.
Right.
The people whose marriages didn't work, this is another freebie. They can't say to you, if I were you, I would do. They can't tell you that because they've not yet figured it out for themselves.
Right.
So we're writing about 50 tips.
I love that. I think it's much needed in this world today. So Dr. Toni, what is the bravest thing that you've ever done and how does it really inspire and motivate you today?
Okay, we talked about it. The bravest thing I ever did, that I've ever done, was to quit my job right, to go into full-time ministry. At the same time, our only daughter was planning her fairy tale wedding. We
Oh,
have,
wow.
have one daughter and three sons.
Mm-hmm.
And her wedding was planned for October. By the way, she's now been married 25 years. So her,
Congratulations to her.
her yeah, congratulations to them both. And this was June, right before the October wedding of the same year. And I sensed that God was saying, leave the Afro, go into full-time ministry.
Mm-hmm.
And that the God was going to provide. So I talked to my husband first. It just wasn't some announcement out there. So,
Right.
and he was used to I like the way you called it, curiosity. He would, and if I said I felt that God was leading me, he very rarely, if ever, debates that. I mean, he's just that kind of guy, right? So I told him first, and then I told my daughter, and she was like, "Oh my gosh, Mom, I got this big wedding. We got this, we got that, we got this." She's running
Right.
this, what are you doing, kind of thing. And I said, "This is what God said." So I think she called her brothers and other people, like, "Mom, okay?"
Yeah, she's losing her mind.
Listen, she still had the most beautiful, elegant wedding, that she planned to have. And so I think it's pretty bold. It's not that bold to leave a position. People do it every day. It's pretty bold to leave a position and not sure
Yeah.
what your next is, but trusting that God is leading you. So I try not to make what people would say a hasty decision, but a prayerful
Mm-hmm.
decision. So that was pretty bold. And I think the other thing you asked me about, the one thing, but the second thing is traveling all the way to Uganda, Kampala, Uganda by myself. I think that was pretty bold too.
Yeah. Was that part of your ministry work?
I was going to I was going to a place in Kampala called Prayer Mountain, where people from all over the world, they still come annually
Mm-hmm.
to have prayer for like 10 days. We were internationals from America, so
Mm-hmm.
we didn't stay on the mountain. Yay, we stayed in the hotel. But
Right.
that was a pretty long trip to East Africa by myself.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. Well, Dr. Toni, I truly appreciate our friendship. You're such just a wonderful spirit. And I want more of the world to know who you are. I want more of the world to know about your family. I want more of the world to sort of experience you like I get to experience you. I really, you have this aura about you as a leader. You have this grace, this elegance, this gravitas that I don't even think you sometimes realize that you have it, but you really do. And I'm so glad that our worlds kind of, came together, and that you're able to, give me a different perspective on the world and bring opportunities to me that I just didn't even know existed. Like I know there was one where you brought Dr. Benjamin Chavis to a group that I was part of, and and it was like he was your friend, and I was like, wait, he seems so like out there as like a civil rights leader, and he's Dr. Toni's friend, and you share so lovingly with the world with all of your everything. And I admire that so much about you. And so tell the people about anything that you want to tell them about the Afro, anything you want to tell them about your books, anything you want to tell them about, how to get in touch with you.
All right, first, thank you for all of those kind words. I think that whoever said it is true. People won't remember all the time what you do, but they will remember how you make them feel. And so I want people to know about me personally that I see people as people. And then if they happen to be a civil rights leader, if they happen to be the governor of the state of Maryland, if they happen to hold those roles, God bless them. But I didn't pursue a relationship with them. because of their role. I pursued a relationship with them because they were a
Human. Right.
a human being. So what I'd like to say about the Afro is that we will celebrate 133 years in 2025. I would love to say it's been without a struggle, but that's not true. It's a lot of hard work, and in our industry that's constantly changing, we are attempting to change with it. So typically, we're not a newspaper, we're a media company, we're a trusted source of information. And people say to me all the time, are you into AI? Yeah, we use AI tools, but just know that it's AI today. It'll be some other part of the alphabet tomorrow.
Correct.
The way that we do things is constantly changing. When I went into journalism, we were on typewriters, and the great Sam Lacey was still handwriting his copy, right?
Right.
Nobody uses a typewriter anymore. We still use some of those skills, we just do it with our thumbs. So
Correct.
the way that we do things is constantly changing. But our need for trusted news and information, I don't believe has changed. If not, we wouldn't be Googling and asking Dr. Google, if I have a headache, does that mean that I'm ready to die? I mean,
Right.
so
Yeah.
so the tools change, but the need for trusted information, the need to uplift people in the community, the need to speak truth to power, the need to be a change agent where you can, and to not sit on your gifts and talents, that has not changed. So I think for the Afro, as we are learning as fast and rapidly as we can about the evolution of our industry, I would want people to say, subscribe to the Afro or your Black newspaper. If you're watching this podcast and you're from someplace else, rely on trusted news, right? Some of the newsletters and things are free, so sign up for them. We employ people. A lot of times people take us for granted and think we're always going to be there. There's an economic model, an economic engine that keeps us running. And finally, for our new book, it's the one that I've talked about. I have a book out now that's new. It just came out in 2025, published by Our Daily Bread, called Prayer and Pen. It's a life and legacy of Carl Murphy, my grandfather, the one I mentioned that was a Howard Harvard grad German professor, 1922 to 1967. What is fascinating about this book is not that I wrote it. He had prayers on the back of envelopes and on napkins. He wrote for everything, wrote a prayer for everything. I took his prayers, curious about what may have been happening in the culture at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And we searched the Afro archives and we matched certain things. So when he's talking about labor in a prayer, then you'll see a section with pictures of A. Philip Randolph, the father of the modern labor movement. When he talks about the NAACP, you'll see a picture of Lily Carroll Jackson, Juanita Mitchell. You'll see a picture of a young Clarence Mitchell on his knees for a Christmas card when he was 3. So all of this treasure from the Afro archives is in that book. And then the new book that Our Daily Bread is also publishing, the 50 Tips for 50 Years of Marriage. That's the working title. It doesn't come out to 2026, but my husband and I are doing that together. And then we
That is so exciting.
take some of those tips and share them through podcasts, like this. And so the Afro is on the move. That's the one thing I want people to know. The Afro is still thriving. The Afro needs your support, and we want your news. We want your news. We want your news. We want your news. She's going to love me, but send your news to editor@afro.com.
Well, I will put that in the show notes. And I'll put the link to your Wikipedia page, the link to the Afro, so that people can subscribe. And I am just so thrilled that you agreed to be part of season 2. You're just such a powerhouse. And some of the other folks that I have lined up are equally as powerful. But thank you for sharing your gifts with us this morning and with the audience. And I'm just, I feel so blessed to call you my friend. I really do, Toni, Dr. Toni.
It's a mutual admiration society, if you will. So thanks, Tracy.
Yeah. All right. Well, that wraps it up for my conversation with Dr. Toni Draper, my very good friend who said sometimes it's just a calling.
Thanks for listening to today's episode of Brave Girls with Tracy M. I hope you found a gem or two that will motivate you to change your mindset, pursue your dreams, and fulfill your soul's purpose. I believe that we can go farther and faster when we connect in the spirit of positivity. and understand how we individually can serve humanity. The world needs more love, so keep shining, ladies. I can be found on my corner of the interwebs at tracym.com, and I'd love to connect on social. Just Google me and my SEO will tell you more about what I'm up to as I step into my purpose as a storyteller. I love you, brave girls. Now, it's time for you to step up your game and become the best possible version of you. I believe in you, and you've got this.